Good evening, gentlemen. And today's panel discussion is going to focus on business and sustainability. I'm joined by my panelists, who of course, have been introduced. But once again, a round of applause for Mr. Antony Jacob, Chief Executive Officer, Apollo Munich, Mr. Ruediger Schroeder, Managing Director, Karcher Cleaning System, Mr. Rasmussen, Managing Director, Kuehne and Nagel, India, and Mr. Sampreeth Reddy, MD and CEO, Worldview Education. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And before we move on to the crux of the discussion on business and sustainability, I'm just going to take a minute to get your opening remarks on a broader issue and a broader view on what do you see and how do you see the role of business and trade as tools of international peace? Because we have here young delegates, of course, across the country, and we'd like to know that what is your view on seeing trade and commerce develop strong relationship between nations? Maybe we could start with you, Mr. Jacob.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words of introduction. Trade and commerce between countries, and I would be tempted here to refer to Germany because I manage a joint venture between India and Germany, I think is extremely important. And there is a lot to learn from each other. And I think that's the beauty of some of these, these setups. For example, I think Germany has been far more developed, a developed economy than in India, and there are some, right from some basic things to some very, very technical things which can be transferred for the benefit of India. In particular, in this joint venture, if I could take an example, I manage an insurance joint venture, and insurance was largely led by the government prior to 2001. And since the opening up of the sector, Germany offered a number of partnerships. And at that point of time, there wasn't too much of example actuarial valuation or in terms of reserving and in terms of some of the science which went into products, pricing, as well as in terms of managing the entire insurance operation. So there was a transfer of knowledge. And today, I can say that 19 years from the start, we've made significant progress. There are things that we can export into Germany. So I think this cross-border pollination is extremely important. It's for the benefit of both. And I think it brings about, the beauty is that you could pick and choose different themes on which you could work. I'll just give one example where there's another company which belongs to the same group, the Munich group in Spain. In Barcelona, 15 minutes from the airport, there is this wonderful unit called Integralia. I don't know if anybody is there from Barcelona here? No. But 15 minutes from the airport, there is this unit called Integralia, from where me and my colleagues picked up a lot of useful stuff. There's 151 employees in that place. 151 employees. 150 out of that 151 are differently abled. And it's a great place to work consecutively. And that was a huge learning for me. And if it wasn't for this cross-border ventures which we have, I wouldn't have picked up. And today we have a few in our office who are differently abled.
Well, that's something to take up as a key important point. Mr. Schroeder, if you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, first statement is that trade and commerce have been in the world for hundreds, for thousands of years, because it's nothing new. And it always helped nations or people to understand each other much better. And I think the world nowadays is very much interconnected. India, out of the history, took a little bit, let's say, half time, so to speak, that for 50 years there was not too much trade with the outside world, which, thanks God, has changed since the early 90s. And nowadays, if we look at different industry like the IT industry, this is a real international business. Coming from Europe, where trade has always been important, and for the company I'm working for, a German company called Karcher, 85% of our business is outside of Germany. That has to the consequence that, for example, the language in the company, even the head office is in Germany, it's mainly in English, because everybody outside of Germany don't speak German. So as an international language, it's English. You as Indians have the big advantage that in school you all learn English, at least if you have a better education, which is a huge, huge, huge advantage for you to get out in the world, because you speak the trade and the international language, which is being used in business, and this gives you to colleagues from other countries, also in Asia, and if we look, for example, to China, a huge advantage, because you have all possibilities if you're smart and willing to go outside to work in a different country and to learn, and hopefully then also come back to India and bring back your experience to develop India further.
Mr. Rasmussen, if you could also just probably enlighten about the cultural links and the international strategy that builds strength to strength countries and bring them together.
Yeah, so I work for a company that doesn't have a product. We don't have a specific thing. We say we sell this product. It's a good quality. I sell service. We sell freight. And we are very much involved with the government as well in the Making India concept, where the government is trying to promote India as a manufacturing hub for a lot of industrials and automotive and different parts of this aspect. I echo the first panel member as well in terms of the exchange of culture and the exchange of know-how. We see a lot of influx to India these days right now, a lot of foreign investments coming towards India. The ease of doing business has improved a lot in India, and we feel that through our daily works, and truly an impact on our daily activities. The previous speaker was speaking about the solar panel industries going forward. That's not the only renewable energy that's coming up in India. Wind power is also a huge industry that is developing very, very fast in the southern and western part of India, and we are doing that development together with a company called Vestas as well. So for us, the exchange of culture and development of know-how is certainly helping the business going forward, and also with that, of course, comes the renewable energies and the SDG 17 parameters involved into it.
Sampreeth, you've been, of course, looking into this sector of international relations with involvement of so many delegates and young minds since a really long time. So probably make us understand that how, besides government, besides policies, how these exchanges, cultural links and strategies and dialogues like these add up to actually moving towards the goal of unity and, of course, global citizenship.
Yeah. So just to touch upon the business and how businesses can potentially bring nations together, one thing to start with is to kind of understand how we can look at business even from a historical perspective. Like Mr. Schroeder was mentioning, it's been always on. I think the other way to look at it is how have nations or the order of nations really hindered or facilitated more business to take place between themselves. And also it totally depends on what we are really calling as a nation. If you're talking about people to people connect, there could be a lot of connect which is facilitated by the people for the people, irrespective or despite the government sometimes. And you can see those examples all over the place. And these are examples where business trumps or economics trumps any other political order as well. The other key important aspect to look at is business has always been or trade has always been a diffusion of ideas. You know, someone has a particular idea which is born there for geographic or market reasons or creativity which has been found there, and then it travels around the world if it's relevant for everyone else. So as long as that relevance exists and people value that business, I don't think any of these hurdles are unassailable. They will be assailed by one way or the other. And once they're assailed, it builds a people-to-people connect, which is far more deep-rooted than any national level, government level connects which can be made. So I feel once it reaches that business reaches that people-to-people connect, there's a host of things which flow after that. There is an educational connect, there's a discovery, there's a language which plays a big role. There's a complete media which is involved in understanding each other's point of view, cultures. So all of them just continue to reinforce that relation and amplify the value in that connection, and that becomes very, very sustainable. So education also is a direct both cause and effect in a way for holding on to these relationships and connect with people.
Right. I'm just going to pick up those two major points of business and people-to-people connect that you mentioned and move on to our audience, who in just the previous speaker's session mentioned that, besides people, besides government, industries need to work on, industries need to bring about a change. And this is where I'm going to draw the role of corporates, the role of pioneers sitting here with me, that with trade and commerce, of course, the consequences also come along, and one is the overutilization of resources. And here comes the topic of sustainability. So if you could give us a few insights into what is the concept of sustainability in business in corporates? Maybe we can start with you, Pierre.
I think that it's absolutely important that corporates take a certain responsibility and live up to those actions that they're taking. I can only speak for my company right now, for example, and we have a very clear carbon emission measurement, so we can tell the customers that we're working with or the partners we work with what kind of emission they have from transporting cargo from all over the world to all over the world. We give them the options of buying carbon credits so that they can offset the carbons what they are emission into the world. It doesn't solve the problem, but it helps to mitigate and sort of eliminate the challenges if you want, in a way that we are encouraging companies to take that responsibility. Trade will never stop. Trade between nations will never stop. It will always be going forward, and that's how nations are developing their economies, and they should be allowed to develop their economies. I think it's only fair that you have economies like India, which has been, like my parents said before, has been sort of dragging a little bit their feet, but now they're coming strong, and we see that in economy they're developing very fast. But with that, of course, comes a responsibility that they have to be able to. And we are going out now and saying that a certain part of our business in my company, we will be now CO2 neutral as of 1st of January 2020. That's only 1 month away, but we are taking that commitment upon ourselves to go out there and be the first one in our industry to be CO2 neutral in a LCL, what we call the loose container loads movement. And I think, like I said, for companies, organizations to take that initiative upon themselves and make that first step is extremely important, to recognize that there is a challenge and that they're willing to go the extra mile to solve it.
Yeah, quickly, just before I move to the other colleagues, if you could let me know that you look into the logistics sector, and investors and companies are very apprehensive about investing in logistics because of the carbon footprint. So with a situation like that, what is the company's agenda? How do you deal?
So you're right. I mean, of course, it comes moving cargo is always that necessary evil. We don't want to pay for freight. Roughly we're saying that 10% of everything you purchase or buy is sort of logistics cost, whether it's a warehouse cost or a trucking cost or shipping or an air freight cost. It's a necessary evil in order for us to buy a product that has been manufactured in China or in Bangladesh or in Europe, there will be a logistics cost associated with it. Companies have not been interested. They want to almost drive the price down to the cheapest possible denominator. But the awareness about being able to actually tell the world what kind of CO2 emission that they are doing by moving cargo from China into India has become one of the key turning points for us to win business, actually. So we go out to companies like Apple, for example, and we are telling them, we are able to tell them exactly what kind of emission they have by moving mobile phones or tablets from China into India, and giving them the option to offset that through carbon credits. And they're taking that upon themselves and say, okay, fine, we will now take that upon us, and we will use it going forward. Other companies are not getting to that level yet, but some of the larger companies, corporations, have to be the first one to take that step, and they are. We see that more and more in our industry.
Right. Mr. Schroeder, if you could give us a few insights.
Yeah. We are a manufacturing company. We produce cleaning machines like vacuum cleaners to clean this carpet here and many others. Our policy is, as I mentioned, 85% of our business is outside of Germany. In the old days, you were manufacturing everything in Germany and exporting it to the world. Nowadays, we have the philosophy, we produce where we sell, which is contradicting to your business because you are losing some transport business. But I think for the sustainability, it's very important that company makes this decision that bigger quantities which are being sold in any part of the world should also be produced there. That's one part. The other part is we manufacture machines. And the goal for many years now is that at least 90% of the components which are in the machines have to be recyclable. But that is a problem in a country like India, where recycling is still not very popular. That means potentially you can 90% recycle. In Europe it will be done, or it's being done. In India there is no infrastructure for that. And I mean, certain scrap metal guys are picking up some metal parts, but the rest is going somewhere, and we all know where, to the next corner, or if we are lucky, to a landfill. But that's not what recyclable products should go to. They should be recycled and get back into the business cycle.
Right. Mr. Jacob, just picking up that point, mentioning that recycling, of course, has not been very prominent in the country because of no infrastructure and financial constraints. With corporates in India, would you agree to this, that CSR initiatives are very limited in terms of the social and economic impact, and we do not look into other issues like that of recycling prominently, which actually is the basic cause of all the issues?
I would tend to agree with that. It is not, and CSR in India has actually taken a completely different turn. It's more in terms of setting up schools, which is not a bad thing, or related to healthcare, and less of these recycling things. But I want to just give a few examples, and particularly I want to relate it to some of the students here. Some examples of some outstanding examples of things which are happening in India and globally. Let me start with India. How many of you have visited or passed through the Cochin airport? Did you notice anything special there? 100% solar, 100%. That's a terrific example which we have. Yeah. Take a guess what Adidas did in 2017. Sorry? Adidas sold over 1 million pairs of shoes made with ocean plastic. Have you heard of Procter Gamble detergent? You know what they did? Do you have washing machines at home? Yeah? Washing machines need sometimes hot water. What Procter Gamble has done is brought about a detergent which does not need hot water. It runs on cold water. Some outstanding examples, and I think there are two things here. One is for the larger good, and the other is, for the benefit of themselves. They do it for the good of the larger good, but there is a benefit to themselves, right? And the more recent example which I saw was, how many of you flew in through Vistara, the airline? Did you hear anything special there? I'm sure on every flight they mention this. They have stopped using plastic bottles on flight. So there are some great examples happening. All of this is outside of CSR. So but I do believe that there is a link, and we should consciously try and use some of the CSR opportunity into things like recycling.
Adding on to that is also, I think, the ban on plastic straws that have come in the restaurants, of course, where, now they're trying to use a more biodegradable way of using that. But Sampreeth, just a question generic to that, and of course, involving our students here, that, these are ideas coming out of young minds. Like, we were also discussing that how 14 and 15-year-olds are working towards saving environment in different ways that books could not, of course, mention. Where is the gap coming between these minds, of course, which is education, and the implementation?
Okay. To answer that, I'd just like to ask them a question. How many of you have heard of this boy named Hazik Kazi? How many of you have heard about this girl named Greta Thunberg? Okay, so there is a little bit of an answer to that in this, which is that there's obviously a lot of awareness around some of these social responsibility, and how we should be personally involved in solving some of the problems. But there is also a lot of gravity in activism at this point of time. There's everyone talking about everyone else needing to solve. I think some of it came in the previous session also, that it's becoming all about we need to solve something, but it's not me who can be alone doing it. But why I said Hazik Kazi, and I'd like to just expand on this, is this boy is a 12-year-old boy from Pune. I mean, at least when he started this, he's devised a technology where ships can clean the plastic in the ocean. And he's used the swirl movement of water, which he observed while he was washing his hands, to actually create this mechanism. And he's now creating more technologies to solve some of these problems. And that's something which you all need to really think about, because it's easy to get gravitated towards something which gives you attention, and that's important. It has its place. So I'm not trying to say the Greta Thunbergs of the world don't have their place. It's a very prominent, important thing that they're doing, but you all also need to focus on what can be done. And that is where the education system also needs to shift to a market-based, solution-based approach, rather than the archaic systems which we still follow to a great extent, which are focused on memory, discipline, replicability, scalability. We need to really be localized about these problems. So one of the ways schools can really look at themselves and reimagine their own structures, place in the society, is to look at themselves as resource centers. Because schools actually converge, I don't know how many of you have seen or thought of it this way, but schools converge large tracts of land in premium places in cities. They can be looked at as urban farms, urban forests, energy producers on the terraces. They could be looked at as healthcare centers after 3:30 p.m. because we all complain about sports facilities not being there. So there's a lot which a school can do for everything, including a lot of things in driving sustainability in the society. And all of these initiatives can become educational tools for all of you to really get into the thick of the action on sustainability and drive solutions, even as you focus on activism. Someone said, we should probably strike. That's a definitely important thing to do, but that's not the solution for the long term. And businesses are not in vacuum. We can't actually look at businesses from an arm's length distance, because businesses are all of us. And we should change how we look at the impact of a business. We have a conditioning to look at businesses as only being driven for profit, but that's not the only way we should be looking at business, and education really needs to drive business is good concept as well.
Right, and I'd just like to draw the importance of education and dissemination in this, because I think a platform it was very clear from the example that what we lack is maybe a platform to voice out, to disseminate, and to, of course, find innovative solutions, because these are minds who can actually do it, who are made to do it. Their concept is, of course, to think beyond what is given. But quickly, since we're also running out of time and we need to be in the specific time, let's just take our concluding remarks on the importance of business and corporates in working towards the sustainable development goals, the 17 goals, of course, and the deadline is, of course, 2030 that has come up with. These goals are more like problems that are driven for solutions for better economic and social development of countries across the world. Maybe, Pierre, you could start by sharing something on that.
Sorry, in terms of
business, the role of business and corporates driving towards SDG 17 goals.
I don't have the breakdown by goal 17 in particular, but I think like I said before, the economy in India and the SDGs are sort of driven towards a common goal. I think governments or companies in India are well aware of the fact that they are having a certain responsibilities. I think we shouldn't ignore the fact that companies are still driven by profits, unfortunately. But more and more so, companies are also allocating a certain budget towards the CSRs. They know that the image on the outside is equally important for them to succeed and develop as it is just turning a high profit and make shareholder values high. So from my perspective and from our business, we do see that the talks of the town is a lot to do with this, with the topics on hand right now. Companies are aware of them, they're discussing them, they're finding, like I said, a budget for it, they're allocating a certain time and going out and talking about the CO2 emissions. The carbon credits has become a talk of town as well. So I think with the awareness that we have now and with this kickstart from Greta Thunberg, I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of companies and corporations and companies, for myself included as well, which is why we've gone out now with a very bold move and said by January 1st, 2020, part of our business will be CO2 neutral. So, yeah, I have a good feeling about the future and looking at the mindsets here and the discussions that we're having with these young participants, I think the future looks bright for us. I really do. I think it's a great forum.
Mr. Schroeder, if you'd like to add to that.
I would like to point out 2 points. I mean, first of all, you are a group of very privileged students, because I assume you went to good schools and not like 80% of your colleagues in the country who have to go to government schools where they don't get, let's say, to be very cautious here, not a very good education. So I think education for every developing country, for every developed country, is the most important thing, because if the government is not spending enough money for education, all the other things will not come, because people will not understand and will not follow. So education for me is the absolutely most important point. on these 17 points. And I hope that I've been in India now for 8.5 years, and I've seen many schools in terrible conditions. And I think that is really one point from an outsider, a wake-up call to the Indian government to do much better. From the corporate side, I would want to stress a little bit on the recycling topic. I mean, you are all consumers, and you all want to have a new phone, smartphone every 2 years, because technology is going forward very fast, new opportunities, and the old one doesn't do it, so you throw it away, you have on a new one. So from a corporate point of view, this is of course good if consumers are asking for new products, but it's only good if we as company make sure that the products we are manufacturing are to the maximum recyclable. But now the problem starts, I mentioned that already in my previous statement, that if the society and the government is not setting the right rules, so there are the right recycling companies in the market who really recycle and not just dump the products, and the consumers are collecting and separating the goods or the dirt, whatever it is, then this is not working. So it's again, it's not only you, it's not only us, it's all together who have to work on this and to make it happen and to make it work. If we don't do this, if we are not able to do this, we will continue to have all this plastic dirt flying around, going into the water, going into the ocean, and so on. And I mean, just an example, and that is not only India, that's also in the US and in Europe. Everybody talks about electric cars, but the recycling of the batteries, which are a major part on all electric-driven vehicles, this is not being solved, also not in Europe. There's a case in Austria where a Tesla burned, and it took 4 months to find a company who was allowed to recycle this battery. And that's Austria, a very well-developed country. So, I mean, imagine what happened in India if you drive your Tesla here. Something happens, you just dump it somewhere, and it will probably in 10 years still lie there. And the battery will do harm to the environment. So we as a society have to look into this in a very comprehensive way and make sure that we are solving all the challenges which are there, and there are many challenges there which have to be solved.
Right. Mr. Jacob, these are young minds here. A word of advice that how from their own business of mind they can probably work towards the goals. Also, if you'd like to mention about any of your initiatives that Apollo Munich Health Insurance has been involved in particularly.
Yeah. So one is, let me just give 7 key lessons which I picked up while doing some work. And today you're in school, you will be in uni, and soon you'll be running organizations or working in organizations. So if I can just finish with this, and then I'll give you some personal examples. So lesson number 1, and this is, I must be honest, this is not my research, this is research which I took away from the net. Lesson number 1, set your sustainability vision and ambition. Research suggests that 90% of executives see sustainability as important, but only 60% of companies have a sustainability strategy. Yeah? So this is example, the Procter and Gamble example which I gave you. Key lesson number 2, focus on material issues. Companies that focus on material issues report up to 50% added profit from the sustainability project. I suspect this would be an Adidas sort of an example. Lesson number 3, set up the right organization to achieve your ambition. Building sustainability into business units doubles in organizations. This is where, you can't have it in one department in the corporate office in a company. It's got to cut across all levels, it got across all units. Lesson number 4, explore business model innovation opportunities. Nearly 50% of companies have changed their business models as a result of sustainability opportunities. So this is straight to the bottom line if you go down this path. Lesson number 5, develop a clear business case for sustainability. It's not by accident, or it's not one small member's work or responsibility. It cuts across the entire organization, all of the employees, and then we will see the results. Lesson number 6, and this is very, very, very important. Get the board of directors on board. 86% of respondents agreed that boards should play a strong role, but only 48% say that CEOs are engaged. It's very, very important that we as CEOs, we need to be engaged and fully bought into this. If not, this will not win. And the final lesson, develop a compelling sustainability value creation story for investors. And here is a true case. There was in Holland, ING Bank gave a concessional loan to Philips, which doesn't need concessions, but gave a concessional loan because they scored high on sustainability. Which means investors, bankers are all looking at this with the same pair of eyes, and there is lots to gain. So this is in general, but let me just give you a couple of just examples which we have done in our office. One is we've linked it with CSR, but it's one of the goals in the sustainable, one of the 17 goals. We have empowered in the last 12 months 800 young women who we've identified who were not the privileged lot, educated them for 3 months, and today they are general duty assistants, which is one level lower than nurses in healthcare, in the healthcare system, which are provided to you and for us. So that's a project which we took and which we see a tremendous appetite. Both healthcare is needed, we need staff, and here's an opportunity for companies like us to contribute. The second one is something which we did for our own benefit, which is putting up solar panels to sort of reduce our electricity bills. And this is quite a simple thing, and when we have large offices, this makes sense to put them on the terraces, which we did. And I think a number of others are also doing the same thing. So 2 examples from our side.
Great. Sampreeth, a question contradictory to everything that's been yet said, because these are full-fledged business who've been running their CSR activities for years, but you are a younger organization with a younger team out there leading these young students towards, of course, parts of education which I think books do not convey. So tell me, how do you manage to take up such initiatives with probably not huge budgets like with other MNCs?
Okay. So for us, the audiences we are dealing with are the biggest resource, and I have no qualms in saying that we probably are disproportionately richer than some of the bigger organizations in that regard. I'll also say this because this audience, now popularly called Gen Z, everyone born around or after 1995 till 2010, how many of you in your families are drivers of technology in your own homes? How many of you decide what technologies and gadgets to buy in your homes? How many of you decide your cars, or like your choice matters? Okay. How many of you have told your parents not to buy something and they listen to you? So there you go. We are very rich. We deal with a very, very significantly important audience, and to back it up with information from across the world, this generation is behaving extremely differently from the previous generations, specifically around being empowered with information. There is knowledge parity within the families. At least in my times, I never thought I knew better than my father or mother. Now the situation is completely transformed. So there is a dependency and interdependency between the older people in the family and the younger people in the family, which was not there before. And that's leading to decision making transferring from the eldest in the family, not in all spaces and places, but in most of the areas, it's transferring to the younger audiences. And to that effect, we really believe that this generation is poised simply because of this empowerment to become a generation of solvers. So that, I mean, I hope Gen Z doesn't have to blame boomers at a later stage, or rather Gen Alpha or the next generations don't have to blame Gen Z at a later stage. We really hope this generation will be a generation of solvers. And I feel that if there's a platform created, and on that platform, it's very much essential that a lot of organizations which are currently doing very well come on part and be part of that platform to empower Gen Z to really find those solutions.
I think you should give a round of applause for yourself. The decision makers.
And just to add, they're not the future decision makers. Or if you say they are the future decision makers, that future is now.
The present and future is both with them, I say. All right, gentlemen, thank you. I think that was a very enlightening discussion. And now we'll move on to certain questions that have come from these young minds. I will just read out the first one that says, how do your organizations deal with cultural differences that exist when you enter a new country? What kind of changes do you have to make to adapt to them? Would you like to answer that, Mr. Jacob?
Yeah, I can do that from, I've actually now managed 3 joint ventures, so I do know a little bit of managing joint ventures. Cultural differences is something which needs to be very clearly understood if you want to have a successful, particularly joint venture, or if you're going into a new land. Now, the way we've done it, or with the way I've done it, is when we have joint ventures, in all of the joint ventures, for example, when we recruited expats to come and work, in one of my joint ventures, I had at an early stage about 25 expatriates from the UK working with me in Chennai. Completely different land, in and around London into Chennai, and which has, incidentally has a huge water problem and electricity problem. So, there was a lot of conversation which goes into at selection time, and it's so important for us. In order to succeed, the talent measurement is important, but it's equally important to understand the mentality of the person who is going to come and work as a colleague. It's equally important to understand the family's mindset. So I've interviewed not just the candidate, I've also interviewed the family members, and it's more to try and understand if they will fit into a place called Chennai when I ran Royal Sun Alliance in India. So I think it's very, very important, and for it to succeed and for it to bear fruits for both sides, that is the foreign partner who's here and for the Indian joint venture partner who's building it in India, it's very, very important to understand the cultural differences, and the senior management will have to play a very important role in sort of making sure that right from the selection to the integration, it's a success.
Great. All right, another question that says that does only CSR can help a business to contribute towards the society, because CSR just doesn't alone enforce the need to contribute. So besides CSR, what else can companies and probably business and corporates invest in terms of sustainability? Ruediger, do you want to?
I mean, CSR activities are 2% of the profit, so it's not a huge amount. And I think, as said before, most companies are doing that or are spending money in educational institutes, skill development, whatsoever, same what we are doing. So for sustainability, I think it's part of a survival for companies to make sure that the demand of customers or governments or regulations can be fulfilled. And I think there is more and more customers are asking for data of companies, what they are doing. So if you want to stay in business, you have to do it. And you have to think about how can you be better than your competitor, because we are living in a free society, and we have competitors. And the sustainable argument, I think, is today part of the marketing campaigns, what companies are using, same as our company are using, like recyclable components and things like that, which I have mentioned.
All right, great. Well, sure.
Can I just give a very good example, and I think a number of people might relate to it here. You guys heard of a hotel group called Lemon Tree? Guess what? 1 in 4 employees is from the differently abled, all deaf and dumb. 1 in 4. And it is not a CSR obligation which he is fulfilling. He doesn't have a CSR obligation requirement because they didn't have profits till about last year. Right? So it was not a CSR initiative, it is something which the founder believed in, brought it into the culture, and he has found that the productivity of these people when compared to the other is significantly higher. So it's a win-win in this case.
Great. Well, I think we're almost up with the panel discussion. Just closing remarks, if quickly for just our young minds, if you could share that one thing you think that young minds should keep doing, and with what aspects can they best bring the change towards sustainability or towards anything in this world that we're thriving
I would say, from my perspective, keep talking about it. Keep talking about what's happening right now in the world. Keep exploring opportunities, use best practices from other countries, implement those in India as well. Get governments involved, see what we can use to infiltrate and optimize in that respect. I think a forum like this is a good starter behind it, but there's got to be some action points behind it as well. You got to go out of this room to afternoon today and then have a mindset of change for ourselves and setting small term goals and deadlines, rather than having a future goals in 2025 or 2030. It will never come. So short-term goals, make a difference for yourself, and keep on discussion and talking about this. Don't forget about this tonight when you finish with this forum.
You are all consumers, and consumers decide which products they are going to buy. So use this power wisely and not decide only by price. I think with the e-commerce we have nowadays in India and in other countries, this is a big danger, because the product differentiation is cannot really explained on these platforms, and people tend to buy just the cheapest product. For example, if you buy any electric appliances, look at the electric rating, what kind of power consumption that is. Also look what kind of company is that. I mean, is it an importer who just don't care about sustainability, recyclable products and so on? So you as a consumer, starting from your water consumption, electricity consumption, buying products, you have a huge power to make sure that companies are acting in the right way. It's not only the companies, because we sell to consumers, and if the consumers reject our products because they don't like it, whatever reasons, we have to make a change or we go under. Very simple.
Well, absolutely right. I think you are the business tycoons of your own house, so the change is needed at that level. Thank you, gentlemen. That was an excellent discussion. A huge round of applause for them. Thank you.